So somebody is asking, right, wait, is everyone doing a 24-hour stream right now? Ken Carnivore is doing one too. I'm confused. Right, okay, how it works is we are not protective. We are very much, if people are going to be our guests, then we can give them the keys to the kingdom. They can do it to their own channel. So although I set this StreamYard link up for me, Richard has his own one, and Lee has his own one, and Jonathan's got his own one, and Chafee's got his own one. But it all originates from here. But the good thing is, you see, because many, many more people have subscribed to Anthony Chafee's YouTube than ours, he will do it directly to his channel because he's got all these people that haven't bothered to subscribe to Rich himself because, we're in the UK and they're quite happy just subscribing to Anthony. So that's how that's working for those that are confused. Lee should be popping into the studio any moment at 8:30. I thought he might be in a little bit early, but there you go. He hasn't come. So last year, to my eternal shame, when I look at the playbacks, I was a bit disconnected as I am now because there's so much going on, so many comments, so many guests we've got to get in. So if I miss one of your questions or comments, I do apologise. And as if by magic, and early as you like, he's sitting there looking wonderful in the full glow of the wonderful Kent sunshine. Here he is, Lee.
Oh, how you doing?
How are we doing, man?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just lucky that I get the freshest Richard and Stephen.
I don't know about that. I haven't quite woken up yet.
I suppose, yeah, depends how your night was. Yeah, good times.
All good.
It's going to be great. So I want to ask you, Lee, if you don't mind, just for those that don't know you, if you could give us a little potted history of why you are so famous now.
I'm the poop guy. No one calls me that, but yeah. So I've wound up with an ostomy bag. That's probably what I'm most well known for. But the reason why I went carnivore was to address my depression, which was a consequence of having a bag, basically. So if I go back to 2012, when I was first diagnosed with my first health problem, and that turned out to be ulcerative colitis. So an inflammatory bowel disease, much like Crohn's, except for it exclusively affects the colon. And so, nasty symptoms at first. It was quite mild, but, typical things like blood when you go to the toilet, which was a little bit of a shock, obviously. And that's the reason why I went and saw the doctor and went about getting my diagnosis. And so this was all in 2012, and I wasn't taking medications until 2014. So, started to take steroids as things got a little bit worse. I was told to eat more fibre, whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and this kind of thing. As well as taking these medications. And 3 years later, I wound up in hospital on my worst flare yet. It was just so bad. I was going to the toilet sort of 30 times a day, which was just exhausting. And I felt like there was no going back. There was something about this flare that was just so bad. I knew that something had to change, that most likely I was heading for surgery. But, when I was in the hospital, they tried their best to avoid that, and so they were keeping me on steroids to keep the inflammation down and trialing me on immune suppressants and things like that, which didn't work. I think it was about 50-50 that I was going to get myself in remission and go home with my colon and then be on like sort of strong medications for life kind of thing. But yeah, it didn't work. They kept me on the drugs for a couple of days longer than they said that they should anyway. And so the very next morning, I ended up having the surgery. They took my whole colon out, so I don't have any part of the colon. So the last part of my digestive tract is the ileum, hence the ileostomy surgery. And so I basically have all my digestive tract intact all the way down to the last part, the small intestine. And so it wasn't until I got home, actually, that the depression hit me, and it was pretty quick, honestly. I went back to my parents' house for obvious reasons. They could sort of help and take care if I wasn't able to do things. And well, I woke up the first morning and they had all gone to work and it was just quite quiet. And I realised that I wasn't really happy with what happened. It was kind of like it happened really fast. When I was in the hospital, I felt okay. I felt like I was in the right place. I didn't feel so strange. But the moment I returned back to a familiar place, it was quite obvious, I wasn't really happy with things, the way it felt, the way it looked. Having this bag now fashioned to my stomach, which I had to take everywhere I went, and it caused problems with sleep. It was a bit restricted, so I felt like I was kind of stuck on my back for a bit. And that also didn't help, that's going to exacerbate my depression, not being able to sleep and this kind of stuff. So it was just this vicious loop. And I was looking for answers, I eventually went back to work and got back to my life, probably fooled a lot of people, putting on smiles and acting like I was okay. But deep down, I was just falling pretty fast and deep, and constantly living my life in my head, putting myself down, finding any excuse not to go out. And, I was single at the time, and I was just kind of worried about the outcome really of my future, and felt like I was going to be alone. It was just very gloomy, and this is how I felt. And actually I reached out to my GP again to address my depression. And it wasn't until I basically went through a service where I called a number, and they were helping me refine how to treat my depression. And so they were kind of like getting me on file and getting things going. And I was anticipating this secondary call, and this call never came. For the first few days, I felt pretty good because just getting stuff off my chest and feeling like I was getting the ball rolling. But they never called, and it wasn't until about a week I thought, I'm not sure that they're going to get back to me, And for whatever reason, I didn't get the ball rolling again. I decided just to perhaps sit back and maybe wait for something else, another idea. And it wasn't until I was sitting there just to my right watching YouTube on the TV, and Michaela Peterson's anecdote came up, the low carb down under one, where it's don't eat this, I think it's called. I watched that, and that was enough for me. I was convinced, like, okay, this is potentially my opportunity to fix myself, because she also had autoimmune conditions and she was severely depressed. And the fact that she's standing there on the stage, glowing with health, talking about how she's ameliorated all these symptoms, I thought, what have I got to lose? And so I talked to my partner Lucy, and the next day we went to the store and jumped straight into BBBE together. She was just being supportive. And first 2 weeks were a bit rough because of energy, and I was very used to a carb heavy diet and not getting a lot of animal fats. And so this adjustment was pretty extreme. So it was going to take some time. But those first 2 weeks felt like a long time. And I was really waiting every day. I was like, I don't feel any different. I don't feel any different. And then all of a sudden at 3 weeks, it's like it all just fell into place all at once. Went to work in the morning, and I felt like I had so much energy just out of nowhere. I was just running on energy. It was like amazing, no crashing. I wasn't thinking about food. I realized I was smiling, and I had all this energy walking around, just feeling good about the day, And then I realized, like, I'm not depressed. I feel really good. Pulled over in my van and just recorded my testimony because it was just so profound. And since that day, in like day 21, I haven't had any symptoms of depression. Even on a bad day when everything's going wrong, I don't feel really down and gloomy. I'm not like so deep, and it's not dark for me anymore. Like I can cope and handle situations. I'm less reactive. I seem to just be a little bit more stable. And I'm happy. I feel good. And I just want to share this way of life. I want to help other people to treat their depression, their IBD, because ironically, I've come to realize that this diet that ameliorated my depression would have also been the diet that would have given me the best chance to get out of trouble, get in remission, maybe come off meds, and certainly avoid these big surgeries where I've lost a large organ in my body. And I wouldn't recommend it. It's not a good time, and it affects everything, because you can't, wherever I go, the bad goes. And it's kind of like, it became my new boss for a long time, can I go for a walk? Can I go to sleep? Is it a good time? And so it's a very strange thing, actually, especially when it hits you overnight. When you, in the beginning, I embraced it because I was so ill. I felt so poisoned almost. I was just like, please just take it out. Just get rid of it, But it's crazy. Like once you come to, and then you're in this situation, it's almost like, oh man, I wish I could have gone back and done things right, because the medications, their advice didn't help me, didn't serve me whatsoever. If anything, it was the complete opposite of what I should have done. And it was the opposite of what they should have told me. It was poor advice. And I'm coming to realize more and more, we've been lied to about so much, but these doctors, a lot of them, they're innocent, but it's this confirmation bias, and as Ken Berry would say, the echo of the lie. So,
yeah, Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons I like having you around is, firstly, you're very concise, you're full of information. That's greatly. And secondly, there's no malice in what you say. You're just repeating what actually happened to you. And you're just echoing, we use that word again, what many people who come to us and say they feel not listened to. It doesn't make sense what they're being told to do. I've got somebody who very kindly signed up for a drug trial, didn't tell me because they thought I would be a little bit anti it. Well, let's just say all your chickens always come home to roost. So anyway, this person had got over cancer and was doing really well and very fit and healthy and was able to walk up the stairs and all this sort of stuff. But deep in their brain, they still believed in doctors more than anything else.
Yeah.
And they were talked into trying a medication because they had one side effect left from their chemotherapy. No other side effects. It was quite a small side effect. And they said, oh, we're doing a drug trial actually for that side effect. So here we are. We're looking at a drug or a therapy that's caused a side effect. And they're now looking at another medication to cause, to try and get rid of the side effect caused by chemotherapy. But the point I'm making is they didn't want to tell me that they were doing the drug trial. I didn't know they were doing a drug trial. And 6 months ago they started. And 6 months ago I started to notice a deterioration. And it was really noticeable, really noticeable. And that's why I'm always banging on about clinical presentation. And there were people monitoring, obviously, because it's a drug trial. And they were having some really bad symptoms. And it got to the point just last week where I just had to be really blunt and said, look, I know you're doing something. And I know you're a really nice person. So there's a reason why you're not telling me what you're doing. So they confessed to doing this drug trial. And I just said, so all these symptoms that you've been asking me about, which don't seem to make any sense, the only thing that makes sense is the drug you're taking, this experimental drug. And they were like, yeah, I think so. Now, to me, that made me quite cross because I would have taken that person out of that trial within 6 weeks because the symptoms, they went from not having any problems walking up and down stairs, for instance, to not even being able to get upstairs within 6 weeks. You know, so these aren't small symptoms. Constant pains in the chest area, which to me is such a big flag you would not believe.
Yeah.
So I think we have to start listening to our own bodies. And even if you've got an expert saying something and they're very convincing, if you've got a problem, you've got to dig your heels in and say, yeah, I hear what you're saying and I appreciate everything, but it doesn't make any sense for me. And I think that's sort of a summary of what comes across when I listen to your videos is how you were confused by it all, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing is especially when you're diagnosed with something and it gives you a bit of a shock, you worry. And so and certainly back then, I was quite blue-pilled. I didn't really question things too much. And I think that we trust those professionals, when we're in trouble, we're a little bit scared, and we want to do right by ourselves, but we end up listening to people that have absorbed the wrong information and they aren't qualified to give you meaningful advice because they're often just giving you a drug, a magic pill that only, obviously suppresses your symptoms. And interestingly, when I first started taking these steroids, they're pretty miraculous in the beginning, that the effect that they have while you're on them, at least. That's the thing with steroids. The moment you come off any steroid, those sort of so-called magical effects that they have, they just instantly wear off the moment so you have to continue to take them. Everybody knows that with bodybuilders. The moment you stop taking it, you're not going to maintain that kind of composition of muscle mass. So yeah, it's interesting because at first I was thinking, this is great, my flares aren't so bad and I can kind of cope a bit better. I can even go to work on a flare because the frequency of my bowel movements were significantly reduced. But every time I flared, it could be like, because it wasn't that often in the beginning. I think people might not realize that it starts with sort of bouts of diarrhea and blood, but this might last 2-3 weeks, and then you're back to feeling like a normal person. You can just, go out. Nobody knows you've got any problems. I don't know that I've got any problems. There's no pain or even discomfort. But when those flares come on, I remember there was sort of like a funny feeling, almost just coursing through my veins. You don't feel quite right, and your body gives in, and then you flare up. And yeah, they can be quite intense, and these obviously just got worse. And I think that drugs, they can kind of, when you suppress things, they come back with vengeance. And I think your body's almost like trying to fight the drug as well, which is crazy. And then obviously the fiber and the plant proteins, the seed oils, even spicy food, dairy would have maybe caused me issues, and certainly alcohol. I mean, you can't afford to be consuming any of these things when you're suffering that chronically with IBD, you know. And what's amazing is that, considering it's a gut problem, it's right in your digestive tract where food travels through. They didn't even really talk about food other than drink a beer at night, one doctor said, and the other one said increase fibre and take these medications. That's the actual advice that I had. That's what I took away. I can't remember anything else, you know. I think actually the first thing that the first doctor said was, if you think it's bowel cancer, you can forget it. And so it was just, it's all a bit funny, the attitudes and their advice, because at the time there was these bowel cancer awareness adverts. And I suppose he was getting quite a lot of patients going in and being a bit paranoid, and maybe got a bit fed up and he took it out on me. I don't know. But obviously I was young, and so yes, it would have been unlikely, but it's not very helpful. And, you know, what did I learn? Doctors are supposed to teach and guide us and be open, you know, but they're very sort of prideful, and they don't like to be wrong. And obviously recently I've had my final surgery, which again wasn't to do with carnivore, just in case anybody's wondering. It's been on the cards for practically 8 years, where they'd left just the little stump that's connecting to the anus. So the rectum and the anus, just 5 centimeters of tissue. And so in my mind, okay, this has to be removed, get it done within 10 years, because that's, you know, to be safe. And it'll be a quick in and out situation because I've only got to remove 5 centimeters of tissue. Well, this surgery I've just recovered from was bigger than the last. It had sort of other things, other complications where they deemed it safer to put stents in both my ureters and this kind of stuff. And so it was very invasive and it was very inflammatory. My body wasn't happy at all. I think the fact that I've been very strict carnivore as well for a long time, well, 2 years now, basically. So close to 2 years before I had the surgery, you almost build up extra sensitivity. So I think if I went in there and had an Ensure shake, and now you're full of all these steroids and all these drugs and the anesthetics, and then you start eating off the menu, I think I would have felt terrible, you know. Lucky for me, obviously, I had my mum, my dad, and Lucy bringing foods and things like that, and Richard, your electrolytes and all that kind of stuff. So proper clean stuff going into my system, and that helped. I recovered very fast, and again, I owe that to carnivore, because last time I was in hospital with a slightly smaller surgery. I know I had my whole colon taken out, but in terms of the scar tissue, in terms of what actually went down, it wasn't so inflammatory. And I was in hospital for 12 days. And it took me about 4 days to walk, and I wasn't eating until about 6-7 days, where this time I walked 20 hours after my surgery. I was eating about 2 days later. I went home in 2 days less time. And as soon as I came home and everything was removed, all the medications came out, everything, it's like I just recovered like that. And I was actually back at work cleaning windows 5 weeks and 3 days, or 5 weeks and 4 days after my surgery, which is crazy, really. You know, that wouldn't have happened last time. And I can only really think that carnivore has everything to do with that, you know. All of the foods that I was eating is exactly what I needed to build myself back and allow the skin to heal. I've got a very nice, healthy scar, you know, that healed super quick, and no problems, no infection, no weeping, no anything. So it was just an ordeal that I had to face. And I'm just glad that it's behind me now, so I can kind of move on with my life and close that chapter for good.
Yeah, Lee, thank you so much. I mean, can I just deal with some of the comments in the chat? We are looking at the chat. I am starring all the questions that are due to come up. We do have guests as well. And I want to thank people for the super chat, which, like we say, is really handy. We will get to every question. We've got 24 hours. Now, one of the things you might have noticed is we don't just glibly go, yeah, that's all right, or we've got a video about that. We try to answer everything. So if you put a question at 8 o'clock and it's still not answered at 8:30, it's not because we've just ignored it. I've got 77 questions already starred to be answered. All right. And we're only 46 minutes into a 24-hour live stream. So we're going to try and get to everything. If we don't get to your question, you can always watch the playback, don't forget. And also, I'll be chunking this into, there's going to be 24 videos at the end of this. There's going to be basically 24 different individual hours, and it'll all be time stamped. So if you put a question on, let's say at 8 o'clock, and we haven't answered it by 8:47, and you've got to go, well, you can then find it maybe in the next section, or the next section, because it will be out there. So I know a lot of people are looking on other channels like Anthony Chafee's channel. Thank you so much, Anthony. I know you're not there at the moment, but it's great that you're streaming this to all your subscribers, which is really great. So if you've got a question for Anthony Chafee, I'm trying to keep it for when he comes on. So that's that. Sorry to monopolise, Rich. I just want to ask Lee one quick question, and then you can get in and ask him some questions, or if you've seen something in the chat, Lee. But one of the things that's interesting about your journey is you can categorically prove that meat does not rot in your colon. So if you want to just tell me how you can prove that.
Yeah, 100%. So interestingly, when I came out of the hospital and I came home, I was quite... I was looking forward to eating the food that put me there without even thinking about it. I just went back and ate all the same foods. And so for a long time, I was eating pretty much everything. I had curries, burgers and chips. I had salads. I had sort of spag bowls and lasagna, all these kind of cliche dishes that we all eat. And I was noticing for the first time, obviously, as I've got a bag and you've got this little peek window and I empty the bag and things like that. So all of a sudden, I'm seeing the state that food's in by the time it would enter the colon, because as it goes into my bag, that's exactly the point where it would now be entering the colon. So I'm seeing all these different plant materials that are indigested and intact. And the interesting thing, obviously, is where it hasn't reached the colon yet, it's quite liquidy. And so what I see is something completely different to what I would, even myself with my colon before, would be able to see if I sort of stopped and look behind and think, oh, right, okay. So everything's totally different. You're seeing what's swimming around in fluid, if that makes sense. And all I could see was like mushrooms and pineapple nuts and seeds and all these different sort of broken up pieces of plant. You could tell what they were because there was chunks of it. You got like broccoli florets and big bits of pineapple and stuff like that. Yet there was no meat. There was no, fish and butter. All that stuff. It doesn't end up in the bag and you can recognize it. It's completely broken down and liquefied sort of thing. And so it's funny, I'd never really questioned all of this stuff until I had the bag. And now I'm back on the standard diet kind of thing. I'm eating a mixture of everything. I'm now noticing all these plant materials in the bag. And so, and some things are definitely worse than others. And so when I would eat pizza, things like mushroom, onions, pineapple, whatever, these were really, really bad. Potato starch is pretty bad, but it's kind of soft like a banana, so it's more pliable. But certain things will give me problems, and the amount of times I'd have obstructions and like indigestion and blockages and things like that from like mushrooms, mango, pineapple, like cabbage, anything like that. Certainly raw. If you're going to eat like raw vegetables, that's super inflammatory just because it doesn't break down whatsoever, and it's just this roughage that's going to be traveling through your gut. And obviously now I'm thinking, oh my goodness, where I had my colon, all these problems, these ulcers, all this stuff was like traveling through, probably irritating the hell out of it, which it did. Things like nuts and seeds, they almost act like sandpaper because they're really quite rough. You've got like sharp edges and corners that are just probably really irritating my bowel. So no wonder I struggled so much. And certainly when they gave me all this advice, I was eating more of that stuff. I was making sure that my plate was really colourful when it had all these whole plant foods. And so when you're eating whole plant foods, whether you cook them or not, they are a problem and they don't digest. Even whether it's soluble or insoluble, it all ends up in the toilet. It really does. And I've seen it. But I've swallowed chunks of meat. And if you look at a lion, if you look at a dog, when they're eating meat, they've also got very high acidic stomach acid. They're very low pH and very similar to ours. You don't see them sitting around chewing the meat all day long. And again, their stomach acid, it breaks it down entirely, effortlessly. So it's not a problem. But the moment they eat plants, you'll see that. You'll notice that the plants are in the stool. And so if we don't digest fiber and we don't digest even the proteins, those things are not only pointless in consuming them because they're not going to offer a benefit, but they actually incur and inflict damage on your gut and exacerbate. If you've got things like IBD, diverticulitis, IBS, constipation or diarrhea, it can exacerbate the symptoms of these problems. And yeah, I've done experiments over and over again, and there's no way I want to go back to eating plants because having a bag is like a problem enough without having these plant indigestible portions of the plant struggle, to even come around and out in the bag. And so, yeah, if you wound up with a bag, all the more reason to go carnivore, because it just makes your life easier. You don't have that kind of discomfort all the time where you feel the food's struggling as well. So,
Richard?
Yeah, just listening to Lee's story, it's interesting that we have Lee speaking at an event in September, and yourself and myself, which we're going to put a link into the description. But Lee will be there for lots of questions and Q&A. It's going to be a 2-day event specifically towards the carnivore-based lifestyle. It's going to be an intimate event where all the speakers are there to network and speak with all of the guests and speak about their experiences. So if you want the opportunity to speak with myself, Stephen, or Lee, and many other amazing speakers, there is a link to that in the description on my stream, and I'll pop it into the comments also. But it's an incredible story, Lee. It baffles me how damaging these products are. People think that we are absolutely mental when we explain to them that all plants contain phytoalexins, plant toxins, some of which, will kill you immediately. And most plants on the planet are poisonous to one species or the other. An animal can fight back or it can run away. Plants are rooted to the ground, so they have these defense chemicals in there. And they do all sorts of things. They cause slow damage, they cause long-term damage, and some of which you can kill you with an incredibly low dose. I'm working on a video, so I have this on my desk. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is a pack of flaxseed. If you were to consume that much flaxseed, you would die. Without question. Flaxseed contains a cyanogenic glycoside called linamarin, which breaks down into cyanide. Yet we consume these products thinking that they're good for us. We add them to our bread or our cereal or our smoothie, but they are toxic, And I quite often use the analogy, and I've got a cup here which isn't coffee, by the way, because I have crit coffee. There's nothing in there, but if I was to hand this to you and it was full of rat poison, this is going to kill you dead, would you drink it? The answer is going to be no, But if I was to say, well, I'm going to put this much rat poison in there, but then I'm going to fill the rest of the cup full of vitamins and minerals, and I'm going to add stevia and erythritol or whatever you want, sugar, it could be anything. It's going to be the nicest tasting drink that you've ever tasted, but it does have this much rat poison. But that isn't enough to kill you. That much rat poison won't kill you. Would you drink it? And the answer's still going to be no. Yet, we consume these compounds just because, we use that term, well, the poison's in the dose, and it's just stupid. And this isn't a dig at anyone who is still consuming vegetables, because we're all on an individual journey. It's taken myself an awful long time to gravitate into carnivore. I came into this through ill health also, Stephen, for the same reasons, but I've incremented these changes. And I used to eat lots of vegetables, but they are toxic and they are damaging to the body. And I think your story is an incredible story. It's a shame that you've had to go through all this, but I think that, positives are coming from it because your story is so compelling. Your reach is incredible on YouTube, especially. And I think that the word that you're spreading, is a positive word, and people will listen. The proof's in the pudding, as we say. Yeah. It's just an incredible story, and it never ceases to amaze me and shock me every time that you tell it. But no, thank you for sharing.
No worries. Yeah, can you believe some people will just put that BS? No,
I know.
I would just make up. I've got a picture of me standing there with a bag, and this is just a good old laugh. I thought I'd pop on today and just lie about plants and fibre and. It's not essential for a reason. We don't require fibre for that benefit that everybody talks about. It feeds the gut. We get the exact same benefit from, and actually better. It's more of a thorough version of that benefit being in ketosis on a carnivore diet. You're not inflaming your cells and your tissues, not irritating your gut, but you are nourishing every colonocyte in your gut with the ketones circulating in your blood rather than relying on the fibre to come in contact, which also means you're destroying microvilli in your small intestine. It means you're destroying your, wearing away at your gut lining and all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it's just not worth it. I don't know why anybody would like to eat all that fibre anyway now, especially you stop farting and my bag doesn't fill up with air and that. It's just convenient,
Yeah, I think I want to show a question here because it's one that comes up, and although it seems an obvious thing to answer, we'll cover it. Caroline's asking, as someone new to carnivore, any advice for having kids age 4, 7, 13 taking part? Is there anything I should be concerned about? I want to flip that after what Lee said, for instance. Yeah, there's things to be concerned about in not eating carnivore. I mean, did you do this question? And this is not being horrible to you, Caroline. This is just trying to make people think differently. Do you ever question Pop-Tarts, cereals, food colorings, the amount of sugar and fructose in fruit juice, which is easy for me to say? There's lots of things that you take for granted, like drinking net zero Coke. Well, no one asked questions about that. I literally saw somebody yesterday with a big jug mixing a zero Coke with a protein shake and just saying, there's no extra calories in this. This is fantastic. They were quite big as well. So they didn't look particularly healthy. Well, what you're asking, is there a problem in eating something that humans have eaten for 300,000 years? Is there a problem? Lee's obviously caught some sort of animal. As you can see behind him, he's been hunting. And that's what we did. We've done that for 300,000 years. And when you do stable isotope testing of long bones and teeth are a really good thing from any relic. Any human remains from any continent over any period of time will show you that we've eaten predominantly 80% animal protein and fats, at least 80% for 300,000 years as humans. And all these modern diseases, there's a clue in that phrase, are from modern foods. And fruit is a modern food in the way it is presented now and how it's been changed to be hardy and sugary and addictive. The same with veg. A lot of veg is just a mixture of one and the other, and it's more hardy and it's sprayed with pesticides. So 4, 7, and 13, should you be concerned about anything? No, nothing at all. I don't see there's any problem with any of the carnivore diet because it's all whole foods, one ingredient food, however you want to word it, and that's pretty healthy. But I'll let the other guys have a go at this as well.
Yeah, do you want to jump in?
Well, I mean, I think any carnivore that struggled with their health and finally gone carnivore and sort of found a robust health for the first time in their life, I think hearing this, a lot of us get envious. So, if you've got a child and they haven't been eating carnivore, it's like, oh man, I wish I knew this earlier so I could have stuck my kid on an animal-based diet sooner, and anyone like me, Richard and Stephen, we wish we'd found carnivore much sooner. I wish that my mum and my dad knew what I knew so that I could be carnivore for life. So no, absolutely no issues whatsoever. Your child's going to thrive. The body is designed to, take on all of those nutrients from animal products and animal sources.
Yeah, for sure. And just reiterating what Stephen said, I mean, we can see through nitrogen isotope testing up to 1.5 million years ago through Homo habilis that we were predominantly meat eaters also. But this is an evolutionary appropriate diet. If we look at the cell in the body, 70% of the cell on the average human cell is water. So 70% is taken up with water as far as weight goes. Out of the remaining 30%, 18% of that is protein. Then we have the next highest, which is a lipid, which is around 5. Only 2% of that, of the weight of a cell is polysaccharide or sugar. That should tell you everything you need to know. Our bone, for example, is made of protein. It's mineralized proteins, protein and minerals. Every cell in the body is made of protein and fat. This is how we are designed to live. This is an evolutionary appropriate diet. If any advice for kids, so Caroline, is it a case of trying to get them to maintain the lifestyle? Because I have a 9-year-old who I wish was carnivore. I do think it's important to give them the choice rather than forcing them into a lifestyle. I do educate her and make sure she understands what real nutrition is. In fact, in school recently, they asked every child in the class which was more nutrient dense, vegetables or animal proteins, and she was the only one that said animal proteins. So super impressed. She knows that the animal proteins are where we get our nutrients from at the age of 9. It doesn't mean that she loves to eat beef with me every day, but what I do, my shop is done in my local butcher. I go to my local butcher, and that's it. That's where all of my food comes from. But I take her to Lidl supermarket, and I let her buy anything that she wants as long as it's a single ingredient food. So as long as it's a single ingredient food, she can have it. And this includes fruit, because I want her just to eat real food first and foremost, but constantly reinforcing the fact that animal proteins are where we get our nutrients from. Vegetables are not as nutrient dense as we're led to believe, and we can get deeper into this, I'm sure, over the next 23 hours, as we do have 23 hours left to go.